What we explore here demands discomfort, an examination of the truths we assume, the beliefs we reinforce, and the narratives we choose to ignore. To keep our load light, we oftentimes push these considerations aside, but today we ask that you confront them. From miles above, the world appears connected. Roads winding, rivers flowing, networks of people and ideas stretching infinitely in an orderly, predictable motion. A system, a structure, a certainty. But zoom in and the illusion shatters. Patterns distort, truth fractures, reality bends, and the perception itself becomes the battleground upon which beliefs rise and fall. There are few, if any, absolutes in this world we call reality, yet one certainty remains. Humans loathe ambiguity. We crave solid ground, unshakable foundations, absolute clarity, certainty in a world of shifting sands, and we call it truth. But the reality we have to confront, the one we instinctively resist, is that truth is at best slippery. We desire absolute truth to be insoluble, yet paradoxically, truth only holds meaning when it is contested. History repeatedly shows that truth itself is shaped not by objectivity, but by perception, power, and self-preservation. And in that shaping, we witness its liquidity, its flexibility, its malleability to serve those who wield it. Truth is rarely a fixed reality. More often, it's a confirmation, a reflection of what we wish to believe rather than an unshakable, universal fact. History provides no shortage of examples where truth bends under the weight of power. After Julius Caesar's assassination, his heir Octavian, later Augustus, shaped Rome's history to justify his rise to power. He became the savior of Rome, while his enemies were reduced to threats in a narrative rewritten for consolidation of power. The Spanish conquest of the Americas, conquistadors' accounts framed their actions as noble pursuits, yet indigenous histories tell a different story, one of devastation and exploitation. Cold War propaganda battles. Both the United States and the Soviet Union painted themselves as defenders of freedom, while casting the other as an existential threat, obscuring truth behind ideological warfare. Nietzsche argued that truth itself is shaped by perspective, that the will to power dictates whose truth dominates. And where uncertainty lingers, conspiracy thrives. And we see echo chambers where assumed truth becomes self-sustaining. Humans despise ambiguity. We resist cognitive discord, and in that resistance, we create echo chambers, closed loops of self-reinforcing belief. And echo chambers aren't accidental. They're constructed, whether socially, ideologically, or informationally. They differ and filter reality to align with personal convictions, ensuring only confirmation and never contradiction. Key characteristics of echo chambers include selective exposure. Individuals engage primarily with sources that affirm their existing views. Through reinforcement loops where we seek similar opinions and bounce them back and forth, amplifying our own beliefs. The resistance to contradiction where opposing viewpoints are dismissed, ridiculed, or deemed absurd. And finally, through social validation where agreement within the group itself strengthens perceived legitimacy. Echo chambers exist in politics, media, and professional industries, and even in personal relationships. They do provide comfort, but at the cost of critical thinking, limiting exposure to perspectives beyond one's own. And then we have confirmation bias at play, the locking mechanism. Confirmation bias seals the cracks, ensuring conflicting ideas never penetrate. And over time, speculation transforms into certainty, not because it's true, but because it's repeated. And how does confirmation bias function? Well, through selective attention, where individuals focus only on information that aligns with their own deeply held pre-existing beliefs, dismissing contradictory evidence. Through memory distortion, where people recall details that reinforce their views while downplaying any opposing facts. And through interpretation bias, where even neutral information is shaped to fit personal narratives. And finally, by social reinforcement, where conversations within like-minded groups solidify perceived realities. And there are a few real-world examples of this in science and medicine. A person who is skeptical of vaccines might selectively focus on rare side effects while ignoring overwhelming data supporting effectiveness. In politics, individuals committed to an ideology may dismiss critical reports as biased or fabricated, and even in relationships. A belief that someone is untrustworthy may lead to misinterpretation of their actions as deceitful. And confirmation bias is difficult to identify in ourselves, far easier to recognize in others. But certainty, once rooted, is dangerous. Certainty resists inquiry. Certainty fuels division. And once certainty takes hold, truth itself becomes secondary to belief. History isn't merely recorded, it's shaped, framed, and repackaged, not as an impartial archive, but as a tool, adjusted to serve those who wield power, shifting until past realities align with present agendas. So the question remains, does truth exist independently of perception? Or is it merely a construct molded by belief, circumstance, and authority? The struggle over truth isn't confined to politics, history, or ideology. It also bleeds into the very basics of how we think by affecting our understanding of things such as faith, morality, and the divine. If perception shapes truth and power refines it, then belief may well be its strongest pillar. For centuries, humanity has sought truth beyond reason, something higher, something unshakable, an absolute truth that is immune to distortion. And many turn to faith for that certainty, trusting that divine truth stands apart from humanity's tendency to mold reality to suit desire. Yet even within this pursuit, contradictions emerge. Like history, religious truth is shaped by interpretation. Doctrine evolves, belief systems fracture, and divergent views arise not from malice, but because even the search for divine certainty is filtered through human experience. So if truth is shaped by perception, and perception is fragmented, can anything be truly absolute? Or does faith, like all other forms of belief, exist in the space between conviction and interpretation? So we look at faith and the paradox of absolute truth. For many, truth is divine. God is the unshakable force, the final word, the unwavering reality beyond human perception, free of bias, free from distortion, and free from dilution. But even within this belief, contradictions emerge. Perhaps the most telling paradox is this: those who hold tightly to ultimate truth often forgive themselves easily when they stray, yet demand strict accountability when others do the same. And examples abound. The biblical Pharisees. In Matthew 23, Jesus condemns the Pharisees for hypocrisy, noting that they impose strict religious laws while failing to uphold them themselves. He calls them whitewashed tombs, appearing righteous outwardly, but corrupt within. Peter's hypocrisy in Galatians. The Apostle Paul confronts Peter for withdrawing from Gentile believers when Jewish leaders are present, though he previously embraced them. Peter expected others to adhere to Jewish customs while excusing himself. Historic religious conflicts. Religious leaders throughout history have justified their own failings while condemning others. The Spanish Inquisition saw inquisitors punish heretics harshly while engaging in corruption themselves. And even in modern political and religious figures of the day, public figures preaching moral purity or doctrinal adherence have often been exposed for personal misconduct. Yet their followers rationalize those actions while continuing to demand strict accountability from others. This reflects a deep psychological bias. People tend to judge themselves by their intentions, but judge others by their actions. It's a fascinating and frustrating dynamic that reinforces how truth, accountability, and morality are wielded selectively. So we move to the possibility of fragmentation of religious truth. If God's Word is absolute truth, how can so many religions, denominations, and variants exist, each claiming its own unique interpretation as presenting the absolute truth? Religions diverge at a foundational level due to historical, cultural, and philosophical forces that shape doctrine and belief. While many share the idea of divine truth, the way that truth is understood and practiced varies widely. And why does this happen? Well, let's look at historical context. Religions emerge in different regions, shaped by distinct historical events and societal needs, leading to unique doctrines. Through cultural influence, religious beliefs intertwine with local customs, adapting over time, creating variations in fundamental principles. Through philosophical divergence, different faiths propose contrasting views on God, the afterlife, morality, and human purpose. Some emphasize enlightenment, while others divine commandments. And through power and authority, religious institutions have historically been influenced by political structures. Competing claims to divine authority create splits and new movements. And finally, through interpretation of sacred texts. Even within the same religion, interpretations vary dramatically, leading to sects and denominations with differing beliefs. Despite these differences, many religions, however, converge on common ethical values, a shared foundation reflecting humanity's enduring quest for meaning and truth. The Golden Rule, treat others as you would like to be treated yourself, is found in Christianity, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, and more. Compassion and kindness, caring for others, helping the needy, and showing empathy toward suffering. Justice and fairness, acting justly and upholding fairness as a moral duty. Forgiveness and reconciliation, encouraging forgiveness as a path to peace. Humility and gratitude, recognizing one's place in the world and appreciating life's blessings. Peace and harmony, promoting coexistence and discouraging violence. And finally, the search for meaning through prayer, meditation, or philosophical inquiry. Religions encourage deeper understanding and purpose. These values form a moral foundation that transcends religious divisions, fostering unity and mutual respect. But the burden of belief comes at the cost of certainty. Despite the shared ethical values across religions, conflict persists, rooted in deep-seated historical, political, and psychological forces. Time and again, we have witnessed how religious differences escalate from simple disagreement to rejection, from rejection to hostility, and from hostility to war. And why? Because belief is powerful, and power, wielded without restraint, distorts. So we have to examine what fuels religious division, and more broadly, what fuels any sort of division between people, groups, and factions, and those go to power and control. Religion has often been intertwined with political authority, leading competing groups to clash over governance, territory, and influence. Through interpretation and exclusivity, many faiths claim exclusive access to truth, creating divisions and hostility toward differing beliefs. Through historical grievances, past conflicts, persecution, and oppression leave lasting wounds, fueling resentment between religious communities. Social and cultural identity. When groups feel their beliefs are under threat, they react defensively and sometimes aggressively. And manipulation by leaders. Political and religious leaders have historically exploited faith-based differences to rally support, justify aggression, or maintain control. Through fear and misinformation, stereotypes, propaganda, and deep-rooted biases distort perceptions, reinforcing the idea that other religions are dangerous and inferior. Religion has the capacity to inspire unity, peace, and understanding, yet it is often used to divide, shaped by fear, wielded for control, and locked behind the barriers of rigid certainty. So we have to examine the psychological barriers to deeper, more comprehensive understanding. Efforts toward interfaith, interpolitical, intercultural, international dialogue and mutual understanding are crucial in the breaking of cycles of conflict. But such conversations demand more than good intentions. They require an uncomfortable reckoning with uncertainty. And humans, by nature, resist uncertainty. We long for firm ground, for absolute truth to validate our worldview. Yet, truth is rarely singular. It bends to perspective. It's shaped by experience, culture, and conviction. And to engage in anything dialogue, or even to acknowledge legitimacy of differing beliefs, requires vulnerability. It means confronting the fragile nature of our convictions, recognizing that what we hold as fundamental may not be as universal as we assume. And because that is profoundly uncomfortable, we more often find ourselves retreating rather than advancing. Instead of questioning, we reinforce. We tell ourselves that truth is singular rather than fluid, because certainty feels safer than ambiguity. But this isn't just a religious impulse, it's a deeply human impulse as well. We justify our own failures as understandable and circumstantial, but when others stumble, we judge swiftly and often without mercy. Hopefully, you'll take the path forward by choosing growth over the warm embrace of the perceived certainty that awaits us in our retreat. If uncertainty drives division, then the antidote must be intentional embrace of discomfort, a shift from rigid certainty to genuine curiosity. Hatred, mistrust, and dismissal thrive in spaces where people refuse to question their own assumptions. Breaking that cycle requires fundamental changes in thought and behavior. It begins with intellectual humility, acknowledging that we could be wrong or that our perspective is incomplete is the first step toward breaking the cycle. This doesn't mean abandoning convictions. It means holding them loosely enough to allow room for growth, nuance, and reconsideration. Through active listening and empathy, when we listen too often to respond, but not to understand, we run into difficulty. True engagement demands stepping outside knee-jerk reactions, recognizing that others' beliefs stem from lived experiences rather than simple ignorance. And that's where empathy begins. We need to bridge the divide. Hatred thrives on the belief that they are fundamentally different from us, whether in religion, politics, or ideology. Reinforcing this divide feeds mistrust. Humanizing the other side through conversation, shared experiences, and recognition of common ground undermines the mental barriers that sustain hostility. Vulnerability and honest dialogue. Fear drives rigidity. fear of losing identity, fear of admitting doubt, fear of being challenged. But genuine connection is only possible when people are willing to be vulnerable. Echo chambers reinforce division. Algorithmic curation, media polarization, and social validation loops entrench people into ideological isolation. Diverse perspectives in education, journalism, and daily interactions disrupt this cycle. Exposure to different viewpoints makes extreme narratives harder to sustain. Accountability and self-reflection. People extend endless grace to themselves while demanding absolute adherence from others. Recognizing when we make that mistake and actively working to change it is how collective moral progress happens. The willingness to stand for truth even when it's inconvenient. Recognizing that truth is shaped by power and perception doesn't mean abandoning its pursuit. Some things are objectively harmful, unjust, and wrong. But rather than enforcing rigid doctrine, truth must be defended through critical inquiry, open discourse, and ethical action. So, we're called to move beyond simple coexistence with others. We must move toward transformation. The solution isn't simply tolerance, it is transformation. It's moving beyond coexistence into a willingness to challenge one's own deeply held convictions, acknowledging the limits of perspective, and recognizing the humanity in those who seem different. It won't be easy, but it's necessary. If all this is true, if perception shapes reality, if truth bends under power, if belief itself is vulnerable to distortion, then where does that leave us? What remains when certainty falters? It would be easy to retreat, to double down, to insist that our worldview is exempt from scrutiny, that we hold the ultimate truth while others remain misguided. That impulse is human, but it's also quite limiting. We don't grow in spaces of rigid certainty. We grow when we allow discomfort, when we question, when we listen, when we step beyond the walls we built around our own beliefs and see, truly see, the perspectives we have been conditioned to resist. That doesn't mean surrendering conviction. It means understanding its limits. It means acknowledging that truth is complex, layered, and shaped. That history has shown time and again that what we hold as absolute is often anything but. So the challenge I leave you with is this. Don't fear the discomfort of questioning. Fear the stagnation of never questioning at all. Because growth is only possible when we step beyond the known and into the uncertainty of the unknown, armed not with rigid certainty, but with curiosity, courage, and a commitment to truth that's pursued rather than assumed. And with that, I hope each of you will take stock of how you approach life, how you engage with others, and how you process both existing and new information that presents itself to you. That you step beyond the comfort of the known and into the uncertainty of the unknown with courage, fortitude, and a commitment to growth.